The termination notice was 2 sentences long. Lorraine Dupree read it standing in the maintenance hallway of the Callaway Group's 42nd floor, still wearing her grey work uniform, still holding the mop handle she had not yet set down. The paper was crisp and formal, with the company logo embossed at the top in silver ink. The signature at the bottom belonged to a man named Marcus Webb, Chief Executive Officer, though she had never spoken his name aloud and would not have recognised his face if he had walked past her in the corridor. All she knew of him was what the other night shift cleaners said when they gathered near the service elevator at the end of their shifts, that he had come from somewhere small, built something enormous, and now ran the whole building from the 65th floor like a man who had forgotten what it meant to need anything. She folded the paper once, tucked it into the pocket of her uniform, and went back to mopping the floor. She finished her section before she left. That was the kind of woman Lorraine was. She had been with the Callaway Building's contracted cleaning service for 11 years. Not 11 in the careless way some people count time, where 11 really means roughly a decade with some months on either side. 11 years and 4 months. Beginning the October, her youngest started kindergarten, and she needed the overnight shift to be home when the kids woke up. She had taken the route others turned down because the hours were strange, and the commute to this particular midtown address added 40 minutes each way by bus. She took it because the pay was $2 an hour better than the daytime slots, and because she needed that $2 the way a person needs air when there is not enough of it. The Callaway Group had brought in a new facilities management firm, and the new firm had brought in its own crew. Lorraine and 14 others were simply no longer needed. The notice said it plainly in the careful language that big companies use when they have lawyers checking every word. It was not personal, the notice said. She understood that. She also understood that, personal or not, she had $412 in her checking account, a rent payment due in 9 days, and 2 children who needed to eat every single morning whether or not the market for commercial cleaning services had shifted. She did not cry on the bus home. She was too tired for crying and too practical for it at that particular hour. She sat by the window in the half-dark of the 38B line and watched the city roll past and thought about what needed doing next. She would file for unemployment in the morning. She would call her cousin Deb, who sometimes knew about work. She would not borrow money from her mother because her mother was 67 and living on a fixed income in a 2-bedroom house in Queens and had already given more than she had to spare. What Lorraine did not think about on that bus ride home was the man on the 65th floor whose name was on her termination notice. She had no reason to. He was abstract to her, the way the weather is abstract before a storm. She did not know that his name had once belonged to a much younger, much hungrier version of itself, working 2 floors below her in a building that no longer existed, on a street she had walked down 4,000 times and counting. She did not know that at all. If you have ever watched a good person absorb a blow that was not earned and just keep moving, just fold the paper and go back to work and ride the bus home and plan for the next day, drop a word in the comments right now, because this story is about what happens when the world finally notices what it missed. Stay with it. She had grown up in the Flatbush section of Brooklyn, the second of 3 daughters born to a woman who worked 2 jobs simultaneously for most of their childhood, and a father who had briefly been present, and then, without drama or announcement, had not. She did not remember his absence as a wound, exactly. She remembered it more as a shape the air took on one side of a room, a space where warmth had been. Her mother had filled it with work and with the specific, fierce dignity of a woman who refused to be pitied. That dignity was the most important thing Lorraine had inherited. She was 39 years old when she lost the Callaway job. She had been a janitor and building cleaner since she was 26, after a year waitressing and 2 years stocking shelves at a warehouse distribution centre in the Bronx. She had 2 children, a daughter named Chloe, 14, who was serious and good at math and quietly furious at most of the world in the way that very smart teenage girls sometimes are, and a son named Deshaun, 10, who was soft-spoken and obsessed with birds and could identify 17 species by their calls alone. They lived in a 3-bedroom apartment in East Flatbush that cost more than it should have and less than most, and Lorraine had managed to keep it for going on 6 years by not wasting a dollar she did not have to waste. She had managed this alone mostly. There was a man named Raymond she had been close to for a while, good and warm and honest, but he had moved to Atlanta for work 3 years prior, and the distance had done what distance does. There was no resentment in it. She wished him well. She simply adjusted. Adjusting was what Lorraine did. It was so deep in her nature by now that she sometimes could not tell the difference between adaptability and the simple fact that she had never once been offered a situation that did not require it. The morning after she lost the job, she filed for unemployment and called her cousin, Deb, who did know about work, specifically a commercial kitchen cleaning contract in Long Island City that was hiring 2 people for the overnight shift. The pay was worse than the Callaway job by $3 an hour, but it was work, and Lorraine said she would take it before Deb had finished the sentence. She did not yet know that this would matter. She could not have known that anything she did in those next weeks would matter to anyone beyond her own small household. She started the Long Island City job 10 days after the termination notice. The kitchen served a catering operation out of an industrial complex, and the overnight shift ran from 11 at night to 6 in the morning. She rode the bus both ways, 52 minutes each direction, and was home by 7 to wake the kids and start the coffee and pack the lunches before they left for school. She slept from 8 until 2 in the afternoon, then ran whatever errands the day required and started again at 10. Deshawn noticed she was tired. "You look different at dinner," he said one evening, picking at the rice she had made. He was looking at her with the particular careful attention children give to the parent they are worried about. "Different how?" she said. He thought about it. "Like you're already somewhere else," he said. She put her hand on his hand and told him she was fine. She was managing. She did not tell him the Long Island City job paid less, or that she was going to be short on the Con Ed bill in 3 weeks, or that she had applied to 6 other positions and heard back from none of them. She told him she was fine, and she was fine enough that he believed her, which was what she needed. She had been working the catering kitchen for about 6 weeks when she found the wallet. She found it at 10 minutes after midnight on a Tuesday, wedged between the base of a commercial refrigeration unit and the back wall of the prep kitchen. It was a brown leather wallet, worn at the corners, and it contained $460 in cash, 2 credit cards, and a driver's license for a man aged 31, address in the Bushwick section of Brooklyn. She carried it to the night supervisor, a heavy-set man named Phil, who was reading something on his phone and barely looked up. "Found this in the prep kitchen," she said, and laid it on the counter. Phil looked at it. "Put it in the lost and found box," he said. "There's cash in it. A lot." He looked at her then. "Lost and found box," he said again, but his eyes were different, slower, as if he were adding something up. Lorraine considered the box, which she had seen other things go into and not come out of. She considered the $460, which was a number she had been needing in various forms for the past 5 weeks. She considered the driver's license, which had a face on it and an address on it and a name on it. "I'm going to call the number on the license," she said. She looked up the name in the reverse directory on her phone, standing in the prep kitchen under the fluorescent lights at 12 minutes after midnight, and found a matching number at a Brooklyn address, and she called it. It rang 4 times. A man answered, voice rough with sleep or exhaustion or both, and she told him she had found his wallet and where it was, and that everything appeared to be there. She could hear the air come out of him from across the phone. "I've been looking for that for 3 days," he said. "Come get it at the front desk," she said. "I'll leave my name with them." She left her name with Phil, who seemed irritated by the whole procedure in the way of a man who had been hoping for a different outcome, and she went back to work. She did not give it more thought after that. She had floors to do. He came the following morning, just after 6, when her shift was ending and she was gathering her things near the back entrance. She saw him briefly in the corridor by the front desk, talking to Phil. He was younger than she expected from the voice, early 30s, with a tired, careful face, and clothes that had been expensive once and now showed the particular wear of a person who did not have time to replace them. He glanced down the corridor in her direction, but she was already at the door, and she did not stop. She did not know his name. She had already forgotten it. What she remembered, in the weeks that followed, was that she was still $300 short on the Con Ed bill, and that the Long Island City job was not going to cover it before the cutoff date, and that her application to a building services company in Midtown had been rejected without an interview. She remembered that Chloe needed new shoes for school, and that Deshawn had a field trip requiring $40 in permission slip money she had not yet put together. She remembered all of these things with the precise, pressurized clarity of a person who could not afford to forget any of them. The winter passed that way. She found a second small job doing weekend cleaning at a dentist's office in Park Slope, 3 hours on Saturday mornings for $75 cash. She put 40 of it straight into a jar she kept on the high shelf in her bedroom closet, behind a box of winter scarves. She did not touch the jar money. It was for the deductible she would need if either of the kids needed a doctor. Chloe knew. Teenagers always know, even when you try. She had taken on a babysitting job on Friday nights for a family down the block and deposited $20 every 2 weeks into the household account without announcing it, just quietly doing it the way she did most things, with her mother's particular brand of wordless competence. Lorraine found out when she checked the balance one afternoon, and the math did not track with what she expected. She sat down at the kitchen table and put her hands flat on the surface and was quiet for a moment. Then she said out loud, to no one, "Lord, she's mine." And she went back to work. There was a period in late February when 3 things happened in the same 2-week window. The Con Ed bill went past due and the service was cut for 4 days. The dentist's office job ended because the practice was moving locations. And Deshawn came home from school with a note saying he needed glasses, and the eye exam alone would cost her $120 before insurance. She handled each of these things the way she handled everything, methodically and without complaint to anyone who did not need to carry the weight of it. For the power, she borrowed a heavy-gauge extension cord from her neighbour, Mrs. Ferris, upstairs, and ran it through the gap under her front door. And for 4 evenings the apartment ran on a borrowed line and battery-powered lanterns that cast everything in a warm amber that made the rooms look, in a different light, almost cosy. Deshawn thought it was an adventure. She let him think that. She sat at the table after the kids were in bed on those 4 evenings and paid the bills in her head with numbers that did not quite add up. And then she went to sleep. And then she got up and did the next thing. She dropped off a portion of her week's groceries at Mrs. Ferris's door when the power came back, and the old woman said she had not needed to do that, and Lorraine said she had needed to. There was a difference between those 2 positions that both of them understood without working through it. She borrowed the $120 from Deb, for the glasses only, and paid it back inside 3 weeks. Deshawn got his glasses on a Tuesday afternoon and came home holding them the way children hold new things, with a careful astonishment at the fact that the world was this clear and had been this clear all along, and he had simply not known. He went to the window immediately and stood there looking at the building across the street, reading the lettering on the door. "I can read it," he said. "Mom, I can read it from here." "I know, baby," she said, and she turned toward the kitchen so he would not see her face. She managed. What she did not do during those months, what she never once did, was stop going. She did not stop the Long Island City job long. She did not stop the Saturday dentist cleanings until they stopped her. She did not stop packing lunches and checking homework and asking Deshawn what new birds he had heard and asking Chloe how the math was going. She did not stop being the woman her mother had shown her how to be. Some people get hard when life tries them like that. They close inward. They become careful with kindness the way they become careful with money, spending nothing they do not have to spend. Lorraine was not built that way. The harder things pressed on her, the more naturally her hands went toward whatever needed steadying. It was not calculation. It was simply the person she was. She had no idea what that cost her and what it was about to return. Spring came. The Long Island City kitchen contract was extended, and her hours went up slightly. She picked up a 3rd cleaning shift at a gym in the Barclay Center area, Monday and Wednesday evenings. The Con Ed bill was current. The jar on the shelf had $240 in it. Deshawn had his glasses and had started a bird journal and was filling it with careful observations in a handwriting that looked like his grandmother's. She had not thought about the Callaway Group in months. The building and the man whose name had been on her termination notice had receded into the general background of a life that required all of her attention and had no room for bitterness toward the things that were simply done. She would not have thought of it at all if it had not been for a Tuesday morning in early April when she was finishing her shift at the Long Island City kitchen and happened to glance at the small television mounted above the front desk where Phil was again reading something on his phone. The television was showing a morning business program she never watched. The graphic on the screen named the man being interviewed as Marcus Webb, CEO, Callaway Group. She recognized the face immediately. It was the same face she had seen briefly in the corridor that morning in January, the tired, careful face of the man who had come to collect his wallet. And above the face, on the screen, the graphic gave his net worth. $4.3 billion. Lorraine looked at the screen for a long moment. She looked at the logo in the corner, the Callaway Group, the same silver embossed letters that had been on her termination notice. She stood there in her grey work uniform with her mop bucket still beside her, and she understood something that rearranged the landscape of the past 5 months in a single, quiet, breathtaking instant. The man who had signed her termination notice. The man whose wallet she had returned at midnight in the prep kitchen when she was $300 short on her electric bill and could have kept the cash, and no one would ever have known. They were the same person. She had not recognized the name when she found it on the license because she had not known his name, only his signature, which was illegible, as signatures tend to be. She had not connected it because she had no reason to. She had simply called the number and left her name and gone back to work. She had left her name. She thought about that for a moment in the particular stillness of a person absorbing something large. Then she picked up her mop bucket and took it to the utility closet and rinsed it out and started her commute home because Chloe and Deshawn needed their lunches packed and she was already running a few minutes behind. He had not thought about the wallet in months either. He had thought about it constantly for the first 3 weeks after he got it back. Not the wallet itself. The name on the slip of paper Phil at the front desk had handed him when he came to collect it. The name was Lorraine Dupree. He had recognized the name, not from any recent encounter. From 11 years ago, and from a version of himself that felt in some ways like a different man entirely. 11 years ago, he had been 22 years old and working the overnight security desk in a building in Long Island City. The building had since been demolished and replaced, but at the time it had housed a mix of small startups and light commercial operations, and Marcus had taken the security job because it paid a living wage, and the overnight hours left his days free for the endless work of building something he could not yet afford to name out loud. He had been so broke in those years that he sometimes went the last 2 days before a paycheck on whatever food he could piece together from the vending machines on the 3rd floor and a gas station near his apartment. He was too proud to say so to anyone, and too focused on where he was trying to go to spend much time mourning where he was. The woman who worked the cleaning contract in that building was named Lorraine. He had learned her name because she wore it on her badge, and because she was the kind of person whose name you learned, because she treated everyone she encountered as if their presence mattered, even the security guard at midnight who was eating crackers from a vending machine packet and trying not to look like a man who had not had a real meal since yesterday. She had not made a show of it. She never made a show of anything. She had simply started, on the 3rd Tuesday she worked that building, leaving an extra container of food from her own packed lunch on the security desk before she started her shift. It was always covered in foil, always labelled with the words, "For whoever needs it." She never put his name on it, she never mentioned it. She just left it there twice a week, regular as anything, for 7 months, until the building was sold and the contract changed and she was gone. He had eaten that food 120 times. He had never told anyone. It had mattered in a way he had not adequately found words for in the years since. Not just the food, though the food mattered in the most concrete possible way. It was the manner of it, the fact that she had done it without asking anything, without requiring gratitude, without making him stand in the particular nakedness of being a young man who needed help and had to receive it on someone else's terms. She had left it on the desk and walked away and let him have his dignity intact. He had never forgotten it. He had tried to find her once, a few years later, when things had started to move in the right direction, but he had only a first name and the old building contract, and the company that had held the contract had dissolved, and he could not find her. He had carried it as an unfinished thing for 11 years. When Phil handed him the slip of paper with her name on it, he had stood very still at the front desk of the Long Island City catering kitchen and read it twice. He had thought it could be a different woman entirely. He had then thought about how many women named Lorraine there were who did this specific kind of work in this specific part of the city and left their name with the night supervisor without taking $1 of the cash. He had gone home and opened his laptop and started looking. He worked at his desk until past 11 that night. His apartment in that part of the city was not modest exactly, but it was not the space of a man who lived for comfort. It was a working apartment, surfaces covered with reports and folders, a desk lamp always on, a life organised around the next thing rather than the last. He ordered food he did not eat and let it go cold on the edge of the desk while he followed her name through employment records and contract documents and the public filing database of the facilities management company that had held the Callaway cleaning contract for the past decade. It took him less than an hour to find her employment history. He found the name on the terminated roster. He found the date. He sat with the date for a long time because it placed her termination at the Callaway Group 4 months before she found his wallet in the Long Island City kitchen, which meant she had lost the job he had not known she held at the company whose decisions were his, and then had still returned his wallet when she was $300 short on her electric bill. He found the timestamp of the contract transition. He found the vendor memo he had signed, the one authorizing the shift to the new facilities firm. He had signed it on a Tuesday in September and thought nothing of it because it had been a line item in a stack of operational documents and he had been focused on a deal closing in the fourth quarter. He had not read the names on the roster. He had never read the names on the roster. He put his elbows on the desk and pressed his hands over his face. He had been trying for 11 years to find a way to return what she had given him, and what he had managed to give her in the interim was a termination notice. He sat like that for a while. The city made its sounds outside the window, cabs and wind, and the particular late-hour hum of a place that never fully stops. He was not a man who spent much time in regret. He had learned early that regret was an expensive luxury that kept you looking the wrong direction. He dealt in the next thing, the correctable thing, the action that could be taken now. He thought about what could be taken now. Then he called his head of operations and left her a voicemail because it was past 11 and she was not going to pick up. And he told her he needed the full personnel file for the Callaway Facilities contract, specifically the terminated list from the transition to the new firm. And he told her he needed it first thing in the morning. Lorraine came home from the Long Island City shift the Tuesday after she saw the television segment to find a message on her phone. It was from a number she did not recognize, and it was brief. It said that the chief executive of the Callaway Group had been trying to reach her, and that if she would call the number, he would appreciate the chance to speak with her. It left a callback number. She stood in her kitchen in her coat and read it twice. She thought about the face on the television. She thought about the $4.3 billion. She thought about the wallet with the $460 she had returned in the middle of a Tuesday night when she genuinely could not account for half her bills. She set her phone on the counter and put the kettle on. She took off her coat. She sat down at the kitchen table and thought about it for a while. Her mother, had she been there, would have told her plainly that she already knew what kind of person she was, and that the only question was whether she was going to act like it or not. She picked up the phone and called the number. He answered on the first ring. She had expected the controlled, smooth voice of a man accustomed to handling situations. She did not expect the voice that was actually there, which was careful and a little rough at the edges. The voice of a man who had prepared something and then set it aside. "Ms. Dupree," he said, "thank you for calling." "You wanted to speak?" she said. He was quiet for just a moment. "I want to start with an apology," he said. "You lost a position with my company before the holiday season and I wasn't aware of the specifics at the time. And that's not an excuse. That's just a fact. And I am sorry for it." She was quiet. "I also want to tell you something I should have found a way to say a long time ago," he said. She listened while he told her about the Long Island City building 11 years prior, about the security desk, about the food left twice a week in foil containers, never with a name on it, about 7 months of a young man's dignity held intact because a woman he barely knew had decided to do a quiet, generous thing and never mention it. She listened to all of it. She was very still. When he finished, she said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "I remember that building." "Do you remember me?" he said. She thought. She had worked many buildings over many years. She had worked that particular one for the better part of a year before the contract changed. She thought of the overnight hours, the fluorescent quiet of the empty corridors, the security desk near the front entrance. She thought of the young man who was always there, always working on something in a notebook, always looking a little worn around the edges. "The one with the notebook," she said. He let out a breath she could hear through the phone. "That was me," he said. She put her hand over her mouth for just a moment, and then she put it back in her lap. "I left that food because you looked like you needed it," she said. "That's all." "I know," he said. "That's the part I've been trying to figure out how to repay for 11 years. There was a long pause in which neither of them said anything, and it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people on either side of something large and true, taking a moment to stand in it before deciding what to do next. "I have a proposal," he said, "and I want you to hear the whole thing before you say anything." He laid it out steadily, without performance. The Callaway Group's in-house facilities division was being rebuilt from scratch with direct employees rather than contract labour, full benefits, a union-negotiated pay structure starting at $31 an hour, and a team lead position that came with additional compensation and scheduling authority. He wanted her to have the team lead position if she wanted it. He also wanted to fund the education costs for both her children, Chloe and Deshawn, through college fully, no conditions attached, because it was the right thing, and because he had the means, and because it was 11 years past when he should have found a way to do something. He said he had looked into her situation as carefully as he could, without asking her things that were not his to ask. And he understood if any part of this felt like more than she wanted from a man she did not know. He said he was not offering it to be generous. He was offering it because it was a debt he had carried for a long time, and he wanted to put it down somewhere real. Lorraine sat at her kitchen table through all of it. Deshawn's bird journal was on the table in front of her, open to a page with a careful pencil sketch of a red-tailed hawk. When he finished talking, she picked up the journal and held it for a moment without meaning to. "I need to think about this," she said. "Of course," he said. "Give me a few days." "Take whatever time you need," he said. "The number reaches me directly. No one else picks up." She thanked him and she got off the phone. She sat alone in the kitchen for a while with the bird journal in her hands. Then she got up and started dinner and called Chloe to set the table and called Deshawn to come in from the back where he had been looking at something through the window with his binoculars. She did not tell them that night. She needed to sit with it first. She sat with it for 2 days. 2. On the third day, a Thursday evening, she called the number again. He answered on the first ring again. "I have some questions," she said. "Ask them," he said. She asked them. She asked about the benefit structure, about who she would be reporting to, about whether the team lead role was a real position with real authority or a courtesy title. She asked about the education funding, specifically whether it came with conditions attached to her continued employment, because she would not accept anything that put her children's futures on a leash tied to her job performance. He answered each question directly and without hedging. The answer to the last one was no, the funding was a separate instrument, unconditional, already being prepared by his personal attorney. She listened to all of it. "One more thing," she said. "Go ahead, Mr. Fine," he said. "I want it understood between us that I'm taking this position because I'm qualified for it and because I need it. Not as a favour and not as charity. If that's what this is, I'll keep the job I have." There was a brief silence. Then he said, "I know who you are, Ms. Dupree. I've known since the Long Island City building. If I didn't think you could run that team, I wouldn't be offering you the job." She let that land. "All right," she said. She started at the Callaway Group the first Monday of May, not on the night cleaning crew, but on the day facilities team, as team lead, over 14 employees wearing the same grey uniform with a new name badge. The badge said, L. Dupree, Team Lead. She wore it the way she wore everything, without ceremony and without apology. The 42nd floor looked different in daylight. She had spent 11 years on it, in the blue-grey hours before dawn, when the offices were empty and the city outside the windows was still waking up, and the whole building belonged, in a certain quiet way, to the people who cleaned it. In the daytime it was full of people at desks, phones ringing, the particular steady roar of an organisation in motion. It was the same floor. It was a different world. She introduced herself to her team on the first morning, standing in the service corridor near the supply closet where she had once kept her cart. Some of them were older than her. Some were young enough to be her kids. They looked at her the way a new crew looks at a new lead, watchful and careful, waiting to learn what this person was like to work for. She kept it short. She told them the floor plan she expected by the end of the first week and the supply inventory protocol she was going to need in place by the end of the second. And she told them that as long as they did their work, she had no interest in making their days longer than they needed to be. One of the younger women, a small, serious person named Denise, who did the West Wing, came up to her after the others had dispersed and said, "You're the one who found Mr. Webb's wallet, right?" Lorraine looked at her. "Where did you hear that?" "Phil at the Long Island City kitchen told my cousin," Denise said. Lorraine considered this for a moment. "I found it and returned it," she said. "That's all." Denise looked at her for a moment, and then she smiled, small and real. "Okay," she said, and went to start her section. He was in the building most mornings. They were not friends exactly, and they were not people who pretended to a warmth they did not yet have. They were something more particular than friends. They They were two people who had each done a quiet thing for the other when neither had the safety net to afford it, and who recognized in each other that specific currency. He nodded to her once in the corridor near the service elevator, on her third day. She nodded back. That was enough for now. Chloe heard the news on a Sunday evening over dinner, and her response was to look at her mother for a long moment with the careful, serious expression she used when she was absorbing something important, and then to say, "Did you know who he was when you found the wallet?" "No," Lorraine said. Chloe thought about that. "Would it have changed anything?" Lorraine picked up her fork. "No," she said. Chloe nodded slowly, the way teenagers nod when they are filing something away in the part of themselves they will carry into the rest of their life. Deshawn, who had been half listening while examining his bird journal, looked up and said, "Is he the one who got you fired from the tall building?" "Yes," Lorraine said. "And now you work for him again?" "Yes." He went back to his journal. After a moment he said, "That's kind of like a red-tailed hawk eating a starling and then the starling turning out to be fine." He paused. "Except nicer," he added. Lorraine looked at her son. He was not looking up. He was adding a careful note to his sketch. She laughed, which was a sound she had not made often enough in the past 7 months. It came out louder than she expected in the kitchen, full and warm, and Chloe looked up from her phone and laughed too, and the kitchen was briefly full of a sound that had been missing from it for too long. The jar on the shelf still had $240 in it. Lorraine left it there. She had not decided yet what she would do with it. Maybe she would take the kids somewhere they had never been, somewhere with open sky and no bus schedule, somewhere Deshawn could watch birds without pressing his face against a window. She thought she might. That fall, Chloe was accepted to a specialized high school program in data science that she had applied to on her own initiative and not mentioned to her mother until she got in. The acceptance letter arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. Lorraine read it, standing at the kitchen counter, still in her work uniform, and her eyes went full before she had finished the first paragraph. She set the letter down and pressed both palms against the counter for a long moment. There were forms to fill out, and there was a program fee for materials, and there was a transit card to budget for because the school was in a different borough. None of these were small things. None of them were things Lorraine could not now handle. She thought, not for the first time and not for the last, about the foil container she had left on a security desk 11 years ago, about the young man she had barely looked at twice, about the 7 months of ordinary kindness she had extended, without a thought of what it might or might not come back as. She had not left that food because she expected anything. She had left it because the boy looked hungry and she had enough to share, and that was all there was to it. It turned out the world had a longer memory than she knew. She helped Chloe fill out the forms that evening, sitting side by side at the kitchen table, the bird journal and a bowl of fruit between them and the window open to the October air and the sound of the city going on in all directions. She filled in each line carefully, in her clear, strong handwriting. She signed her name at the bottom. Have you ever done a quiet kindness for someone and found out later it mattered more than you knew? Leave it in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories about people who were overlooked by the world and then finally seen, there is one waiting for you right now. This is a work of fiction. All names, characters, and events are invented. Any resemblance to real persons or events is coincidental.